Groovy English Podcast.
Hey there! Welcome back to Groovy English. I'm Chloe.
And I'm Aiden. We share real stories, useful tips, and everyday English to help you grow with confidence.
Wherever you are in your English learning journey, we're glad you're here.
If you're enjoying the podcast, feel free to like, subscribe, or share it with a friend.
Let's get started.
English words often seem ordinary, but behind almost every word is a story filled with history, culture, and surprising twists. Some words have roots that trace back thousands of years, while others were invented by chance, influenced by travel, trade, or even mistakes. Learning the stories behind words can make language feel alive, and it can turn ordinary vocabulary into fascinating adventures. Take the word salary, for example. It comes from the Latin word salarium, which originally referred to payments made to Roman soldiers with salt. Salt was a precious commodity in ancient times, used not just for flavor, but also for preserving food. So, when we talk about getting our salary today, we're actually recalling a time when soldiers were literally paid in salt, a reminder of how words can preserve history in everyday speech. Another fun one is quarantine. Today, it's a word most of us know well, especially after recent events, but it comes from the Italian quaranta giorni, meaning 40 days. In the 14th century, ships arriving in Venice were isolated for 40 days to prevent the spread of plague. The word has survived for centuries, carrying with it a very literal historical measure of caution and care. Imagine every quarantine announcement echoing that old Italian tradition. Even words that seem simple, like sandwich, have a story. The term comes from John Montague, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, who lived in the 18th century. He supposedly asked for meat tucked between slices of bread so he could eat while continuing a long card game. Today, we take sandwiches for granted, but every bite carries a tiny historical anecdote about a nobleman's love for gaming and convenience. Many common words come from the natural world. The word butterfly is particularly curious. It may seem straightforward, but some suggest it comes from the Old English butterfleoge, because butterflies were thought to steal butter or because of their buttery color. The word shows how imagination, observation, and folklore mix to create the names we use every day without a second thought. Nightmare is another word with an unexpected story. Today, it describes a bad dream, but its origins are even darker. It comes from the Old English mare, a mythological demon believed to sit on people's chests while they slept, causing bad dreams. The word carries centuries of superstition, showing that English is not just about communication, it's also about human imagination and fear. Some words traveled across continents through trade and exploration. Coffee, for instance, comes from the Arabic koa. The drink and the word journeyed from the Middle East to Europe in the 16th century, evolving along the way. Each sip and each mention of coffee today is a reminder of centuries of cultural exchange, curiosity, and globalization. Then there's robot, which is surprisingly modern. Coined in 1921 by Czech writer Karel Čapek in his play RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, the word comes from the Czech robota, meaning forced labor. Today, it's used in countless languages worldwide, showing how literature can invent words that transcend borders and enter everyday life. Even playful words like okay have intriguing origins. Many theories exist, but the most accepted traces it to a 19th century Boston abbreviation of all correct, a humorous misspelling of all correct. This tiny joke from history has traveled around the world, becoming perhaps the most universally recognized English word, demonstrating that language can carry humor across centuries. Learning the story behind words isn't just educational. It's a reminder that language evolves, absorbs, and reflects human creativity, mistakes, and imagination. Each word we speak today has a lineage, a path, and sometimes a story that's stranger, funnier, or richer than we could imagine. By exploring these origins, learners can connect more deeply with English, seeing it not as a static set of rules, but as a living, breathing record of human history, culture, and ingenuity. Words like alphabet remind us that even fundamental concepts have origins. It comes from the Greek letters alpha and beta, the first two letters of the Greek alphabet. This simple term connects modern learners to an ancient civilization, showing how foundational ideas travel through time and shape the way we communicate. Many idioms are like secret windows into history too. Bite the bullet, for instance, comes from the practice of having soldiers literally bite bullets during surgery before anesthesia existed. Every time we use it today, we echo a small historical moment that reveals courage, fear, and adaptation in human experience. Even simple greetings have stories. Goodbye comes from God be with ye, a contraction over centuries that has transformed into the quick farewell we use today. Words like this remind us how language evolves naturally, carrying fragments of faith, culture, and social practice. Panic is a word with a literal godly origin. It comes from Pan, the Greek god of shepherds and wild nature, who is believed to cause sudden fear in lonely travelers. Today, we use the word without thinking about Pan's mischief, but its origin ties modern expression directly to mythology and human storytelling. Language is full of surprises, from technical words like compass to playful ones like hodgepodge. Each carries a story of invention, borrowing, adaptation, or humor. By uncovering these stories, learners not only build vocabulary, they engage with history, culture, and imagination at every step. Some words are borrowed from other languages and adapted over centuries. Chocolate comes from the Nahuatl word zacatl, a drink made by the Aztecs. The word traveled across continents with colonization and trade, reminding us how global contact shapes the vocabulary we take for granted today. Even everyday verbs have historical roots. Escape, for example, comes from the Latin excapere, meaning to get out of one's cape or cloak. The imagery of slipping out of a garment survives in a word we use effortlessly today, showing that language carries metaphorical richness we rarely notice. Learning the story behind words can also make memorization fun. When you know that pandemonium was coined by John Milton to mean all demons in Paradise Lost, it becomes a vivid mental image rather than an abstract term. Stories stick, and words become more than vocabulary. They become little adventures in history and imagination. Even modern words like internet have interesting birth stories. Coined in the 1970s, it combines interconnected network to describe the emerging digital world. Today, billions of people use it daily, showing how language continuously evolves to meet human innovation and societal change. Slang terms like cool or hang out have fascinating evolution too. Cool originally referred to temperature, then mood, and eventually became a cultural marker of attitude and style. Words shift in meaning, reflecting trends, values, and social creativity. By exploring the origins of common words, learners gain more than vocabulary. They gain stories, historical insight, and a playful connection to English. Words are not just tools. They are bridges to culture, imagination, and shared human experience. Each time we speak, we carry a story forward, participating in the living history of language. Words may seem like simple tools for communication, but they are far more than that. Each word we speak is a time capsule that holds fragments of human history, culture, migration, and imagination. By exploring the origins of everyday English words, we uncover fascinating stories that show how language has grown, changed, and adapted to reflect our lives. English learners often memorize vocabulary lists, but when you learn the story behind the words, they stop being abstract and start feeling alive, memorable, and full of personality. Let's begin with one of the most ordinary words, salary. Today, we think of it as money paid for work, but in ancient Rome, soldiers were sometimes given salarium, a payment connected to salt. Salt was a valuable resource for preserving food and maintaining health. Imagine being paid in salt instead of cash. This shows us how economics, survival, and language intersected in history and how words carry those echoes forward into the present. Another word shaped by history is quarantine. It comes from the Italian quarantagiorni, which means 40 days. In the 14th century, Venice required ships suspected of carrying disease to remain anchored for 40 days before docking to prevent the spread of plague. The term has survived for centuries, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, we all suddenly reconnected with this old Italian tradition through the very word itself. Sometimes words carry the names of people. Sandwich, for instance, is named after John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich in 18th century England. He loved gambling so much that he asked for meat placed between 2 slices of bread, allowing him to eat without leaving the card table. What began as one man's quirky eating habit became a word that billions of people now use daily, across every culture. Even the playful word butterfly has curious roots. In Old English, it was butterfliage. Some say the name came from the buttery yellow color of certain species, while others believe people once thought butterflies stole milk and butter. The word reveals how myths, imagination, and observation blend into naming creatures of the natural world. Nightmare may sound ordinary, but its story is spooky. The word comes from the Old English mare, a mythical demon believed to sit on people's chests as they slept, suffocating them and causing frightening dreams. What we now use casually to describe a bad dream once reflected deep cultural fears and supernatural beliefs. Every time you say nightmare, you echo ancient folklore. Global trade has left deep marks on English vocabulary. Take coffee, for example. It comes from the Arabic kawa, which traveled through Turkish as kahve and eventually into English via Italian. The drink itself spread with trade routes, and the word journeyed with it, becoming a daily ritual and universal term that reflects centuries of cultural exchange. A surprisingly modern word is robot. It was first used in 1921 by Czech playwright Karel Čapek in his play R.U.R. Rossum's Universal Robots. It comes from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labor. A single play introduced a word that is now part of nearly every human language, proving how literature can give birth to concepts that shape the future. The word alphabet reminds us of deep linguistic history. It comes from the Greek letters alpha and beta. The Greeks borrowed writing ideas from the Phoenicians, and English inherited the concept centuries later. Even the word for our system of letters is a historical monument, reminding us that communication builds upon the innovations of ancient civilizations. Humor can also shape language. Okay, one of the most recognized words in the world comes from a 19th century American joke, the humorous misspelling all correct for all correct. What began as a playful abbreviation has become a global signal of agreement, showing that even jokes can leave permanent marks on language. Some words reflect literal practices. Bite the bullet, often used as an idiom for facing something painful, comes from a time when soldiers undergoing surgery without anesthesia would literally bite down on a bullet to endure the pain. Every time we use the phrase, we echo a small, vivid piece of history. Simple greetings often hide long stories. Goodbye, for example, is actually a shortened form of God be with ye. Over time, the phrase was contracted and transformed into the word we use today. This shows how language naturally simplifies while still carrying fragments of culture and belief within it. Mythology has also left its fingerprints on English. The word panic comes from the Greek god Pan, who is believed to cause sudden, irrational fear in lonely travelers. Today, panic feels psychological, but its roots remind us of ancient myths about wild nature and human vulnerability. Sometimes words come from accidental inventions. Serendipity, meaning a happy discovery by chance, was coined in the 18th century by Horace Walpole, inspired by a Persian fairy tale about the three princes of Serendip. Today, it's used worldwide, showing how a single creative spark can add richness to language. Colonialism and exploration introduced countless words to English. Chocolate, for instance, comes from the Nahuatl word zacatl, used by the Aztecs to describe a bitter drink made from cacao. When Europeans encountered it, they adopted both the food and the word, adapting it to their languages. Now, chocolate is global, but every mention recalls its indigenous American roots. Food words often reveal cultural exchange. Ketchup has roots in the Chinese word kutsayap, a fermented fish sauce. English sailors encountered it, and over time it evolved into the sweet tomato-based condiment we know today. This tiny bottle in many kitchens is a silent story of global travel and adaptation. Even words for escape have fascinating origins. The word escape, comes from the Latin ex, out of, and cappa, cloak. It literally meant slipping out of a cloak to get away. This vivid image turned into a verb we use daily, without even realizing we're invoking ancient metaphors of survival. Hazard is another common word with adventurous roots. It comes from the Arabic alzar, meaning the dice. It was used in gambling games and came into English through French. Today, hazard means risk or danger, but its story begins at the gambling table, showing how leisure shaped vocabulary. Some words remind us of natural resources. Whiskey comes from the Irish Gaelic Uspitha, meaning water of life. Over centuries, the phrase was shortened and anglicized into whiskey. Every sip of the word and the drink carries echoes of Irish culture and linguistic creativity. Alcohol, too, has Arabic roots. It comes from alcohol, meaning a powdered cosmetic. Over time, its meaning shifted to refer to distilled substances. Today, it's part of everyday vocabulary, but its story reflects centuries of science, medicine, and trade. When we think about the word window, it seems so ordinary, yet its roots are wonderfully poetic. It comes from Old Norse vindaga, meaning wind-eye. Vikings who built houses with small openings to let in light and air thought of them literally as the eye of the house, gazing out to the world. When you look through a window today, you're carrying forward that ancient metaphor of the house breathing and seeing through its own eye. The word honeymoon also has a fascinating history. In Old English, it referred to the first month after marriage, when couples were expected to drink mead, a sweet honey-based drink, to encourage fertility and happiness. The honey represented sweetness, and the moon suggested the passage of one lunar cycle. Over time, the meaning shifted from the drink itself to the joyful trip couples now take after their wedding. Clue is a word that came to English in a most unusual way. It originally meant a ball of thread from the Old English clue. In Greek mythology, the hero Theseus found his way out of the labyrinth after slaying the Minotaur by following a ball of thread given to him by Ariadne. That image of a guiding thread became the metaphor we use today for a hint or piece of evidence that helps us find our way through a puzzle. Another everyday word with a mythical twist is atlas. When we think of an atlas, we imagine a book of maps, but the name comes from the Greek titan Atlas, who was condemned to hold up the sky. Early map makers would often decorate their books with images of Atlas bearing the globe on his shoulders, and eventually, the name stuck. Now, when we open an atlas, we're not just looking at geography, but at echoes of Greek mythology. Take the word lunatic, which we use to describe someone behaving wildly or irrationally. Its roots come from the Latin lunaticus, meaning of the moon. In medieval times, people believed that the phases of the moon could influence human behavior, causing madness or strange moods. While modern science no longer supports the idea, the word still reminds us of how ancient cultures tried to make sense of human emotions and mental states by connecting them to the rhythms of nature. The word nice has gone through one of the strangest transformations in the English language. In Middle English, it meant foolish or ignorant, borrowed from the Latin nescius, meaning not knowing. Over the centuries, its meaning shifted again and again, passing through stages of meaning silly, fussy, delicate, and precise, before finally arriving at the positive sense of kind and pleasant that we know today. Every time we use nice, we're unknowingly tracing centuries of shifting cultural attitudes. Even the word muscle has a surprising story. It comes from the Latin musculus, which means little mouse. Ancient people thought that the movements of muscles under the skin looked like mice scurrying around. Next time you flex your arm, you might imagine a tiny mouse running beneath your skin. That image is hidden right inside the word itself. Another fun example is the word disaster. It comes from the Italian disastro, meaning bad star. In ancient times, people believed that stars influenced human destiny, and when something went terribly wrong, it was blamed on unlucky alignments of the heavens. Today, we use disaster without any thought of astrology, but the word's origin reminds us of a time when people looked to the night sky to explain the troubles of life on Earth. The word echo is tied directly to myth as well. In Greek mythology, Echo was a nymph who loved to talk, but angered the goddess Hera, who punished her by taking away her ability to speak freely. She could only repeat the last words spoken to her. That tragic story of Echo became immortalized in the language, and today, every time we hear our voice bounce back from a canyon wall or a microphone, we are repeating her name and her fate. Alcohol has a story that begins in the Middle East, and alchemy shares a similar heritage. Both words trace back to Arabic roots. Alchemia referred to the ancient practice of transforming matter, especially turning base metals into gold. These mystical practices traveled through Arabic scholars into medieval Europe, eventually giving rise to modern chemistry. So whenever we hear the word alchemy, we are reminded of how science, mysticism, and language once blended together. If we think about the word book, we uncover another rich history. It comes from the Old English BC, which is linked to the word for beech tree. In ancient times, inscriptions were often carved into wooden tablets made from beech. The tree itself gave its name to the very concept of written records, and that association remains with us in the simple word book. Let's consider the word school. It comes from the Greek skol, which originally meant leisure or free time. For the ancient Greeks, only people with leisure time could devote themselves to study and discussion. It's fascinating that what we now associate with work, effort, and even stress once had roots in the idea of free, unstructured time for learning and thinking. The word candidate has a surprising and rather visual origin. It comes from the Latin candidatus, which means clothed in white. In ancient Rome, people seeking public office wore white togas to show their purity and honesty. That word became candidate in English, but the clothing tradition faded away, leaving only the word to remind us of Roman political customs. Sometimes words show us the creativity of human imagination. The word dandelion comes from the French dent de lion, meaning lion's tooth. This was a reference to the jagged edges of the flower's leaves. We don't think of lions when we see dandelions today, but the name still carries that vivid picture. In fact, many plant and animal names preserve imaginative comparisons that reveal how people once saw nature. Vaccine is another word born out of scientific history. It comes from the Latin vacca, meaning cow. In the 18th century, Edward Jenner discovered that milkmaids who had caught cowpox seemed immune to smallpox. He used material from cowpox sores to create the first vaccination, and so the word itself honors the cow that helped save millions of lives. Let's not forget jeans. The word comes from Genoa, a city in Italy where a type of sturdy cotton fabric was produced. French weavers adapted it into denim, from serge de Nîmes, serge fabric from Nîmes, France. Today, denim jeans are worn everywhere in the world, but their names still point to the specific towns where their story began. Even technology words carry stories. Bluetooth, for example, is named after King Harald Bluetooth, a 10th century Danish king who was famous for uniting different tribes. The creators of the technology borrowed his name because their invention connected different devices. The logo for Bluetooth even combines two ancient runes representing his initials. A modern wireless connection carries an echo of Viking history. The word zero is another fascinating case. It comes from the Arabic sifr, meaning empty or nothing, which itself was based on Sanskrit concepts of emptiness in mathematics. When Europeans adopted the word through Latin as zephyrum, it eventually shortened to zero. This simple, essential number carries a story of mathematical innovation that traveled across continents and languages. The word tragedy also has dramatic roots. It comes from the Greek tragoidia, meaning goat song. Scholars believe it referred to the ancient rituals in which a goat was sacrificed as part of early theatrical performances. Over time, the word shifted to mean serious drama with sorrowful endings, but hidden in its syllables is the echo of an animal sacrifice long ago. If you've ever wondered about the word breakfast, it's beautifully literal. It means breaking the fast after sleeping all night. While it's easy to overlook, the word reminds us of daily human rituals and the natural rhythm of fasting and feasting that connects us to our ancestors. Cereal is tied to myth as well, coming from Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture. Grains were so central to Roman life that the goddess herself gave her name to the food group, and the word carried forward into English. Today, when we pour a bowl of cereal, we are invoking a Roman goddess without even realizing it. Another curious word is malaria, which comes from Italian, literally meaning bad air. People once believed that the disease came from breathing swampy, foul-smelling air. The true cause, mosquitoes, was discovered much later, but the old name has remained, preserving a misunderstanding in its very structure. Consider alphabet soup, a playful phrase often used to describe a confusing collection of acronyms. The phrase emerged in the 20th century when companies and government agencies began producing long lists of abbreviations. It was compared to bowls of soup containing alphabet-shaped pasta. Even silly modern words like this remind us of how everyday experiences become metaphors that stick. The word glamour is tied to grammar. In medieval Scotland, grammar was not only about language, but also associated with knowledge of magic and spells. Over time, the idea of mysterious charm shifted into the modern sense of beauty, allure, and fascination. Now when we say glamour, we don't think of textbooks or teachers, but the word still carries its scholarly roots. The word virus has become all too familiar in recent years, but its origin is Latin, meaning poison or slimy liquid. In the early days of medicine, diseases were thought of as toxins invading the body. Modern science has redefined the term, but the original image of corruption and danger lingers inside the word itself. Apron has a quirky history too. It was originally napron in Middle English, but through a process called misdivision, people began saying a napron, which slowly shifted into an apron. That little accident of speech permanently reshaped the word, reminding us that language doesn't just evolve through grand history, but also through small, everyday mistakes. Finally, let's take good night. It seems like the simplest of phrases, but it carries centuries of ritual and kindness. In Old English, parting phrases were often blessings or wishes for safety through the dark hours. Today, when we say good night, we're not only ending the day, but also carrying on a long tradition of care, protection, and goodwill that has survived across languages and generations.
Your English is shining brighter by the minute. Hit that next video to keep leveling up your skills. Or dive into our other episodes for more secrets to talk like a pro. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to join the Groovy English crew.